Hello and welcome to Teenagers Untangled, the audio hug for everyone supporting anyone going through the tween and tween years. I'm Rachel Richards, journalist, mother of 2 teenagers and 2 bonus daughters. Now, in today's episode, we're going to talk about tweens and early teens and explore why it hurts so much to watch our child struggle socially and why our instincts to fix things making it even worse. And the good news is that there's new research that shows there's one thing our kids can learn that can reduce depression in teenagers by nearly 40%. So it's really great news. Now, with us to unpack all of this is early adolescent parent coach Megan Saxelby, the former teacher who specialises in early adolescent developmental window, where those pro-social skills are most teachable. She's also the founder of Wild Feelings. She coaches parents through the common pain points of parenting 10 to 14-year-olds, and we know there's a lot of pain. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, it's my favorite age. It's like
It's a fascinating age.
I taught middle school for 17 years, and anytime I told someone what I did, their response was always either like disgust or that I should be sainted. And I used to really throw people when I'd be like, no, your response is the problem. I think they're the best. We just have to shift how we see them.
Yes, and I think I think it's actually because there's a gear shift generally for the parents and actually keeping up with that and knowing what we're doing. And the truth is, I've spoken to friends about this before where, you know, if you're the teacher, you're seeing a lot of these people, little people coming through your school.
100.
I've got my one kid, you know, this is my first time. And so it's, I need help as well. So it's brilliant that you're here. And you actually recently described adolescence as a friendship meat grinder.
Yes.
Which I just thought that's so on the money. But you also said they'll eventually find their people. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, okay, what's going on there, and then how can we calm down so we don't sit there thinking, oh, they're never going to have any friends. It's a disaster.
Right.
Because I think that's how we often feel. I have actually got lots of episodes on this topic, even with my daughters, because it really vexes us. Now, there is a lot of friendship turmoil. And you call it middle school in America. In England, we have junior school that finishes around 11 or 13, and then senior school. And but this turmoil is not just them being difficult. There's actually science behind it. So what's actually happening to children's brains when they're feeling excluded or left out?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things, like you said, about parents just having their one is that you don't also have time to like read the studies about personality theory or neuroscience, right? You're just trying to get through your day. And then it's not just that it's your first time with your one kid. It's like your most precious little being, right?
Yeah.
It's like you built them, you made them, you love them. So it's not like you're not sort of neutrally watching a person navigate the world. You're watching this thing you love so much go through genuine pain. And from a brain perspective, I think what we forget or don't know about this age is that we kind of used to talk about, 0 to 3 as some of the most like key development in young people's lives or kids' lives. And now we really, because, you don't have to be dead to look at people's brains these days. fMRI studies show that it really is like 11 to 17, but it's when they're really starting to experiment with their identity. And the easiest way to make sense of what's happening in their brain at this moment is that belonging is oxygen. Belonging is everything. Yes. It is what's making the blood flow. It's what's making the brain grow. It's it's making them feel stable. It's what's making them act out or retreat or isolate or anything. It's that belonging truly is oxygen. And at this age, it is the oxygen that they need to be able to do most anything else. And it
feels absolutely life-threatening if they don't feel they belong.
I mean, there are fMRI studies that show, and this is not just for children. I know we can all attest to this as adults, that your brain processes the threat of humiliation the same way it processes the threat of being punched in the face. So the exact same mechanisms, like the reason they react so loudly and so big is that to them, and to all of us actually, the threat of humiliation or isolation really does feel like the same threat as physical harm. And so your body puts up these fight or flight defenses and you flood with emotion because you're trying to either prepare for or make sense of this turmoil. And it's so hard because I was in the States, like you said, we call it middle school. So I was a dean, which meant I was the one in charge of discipline, social dynamics. Anytime a kid made a mistake, I was the one talking to them. Anytime a parent was having a hard time or the kid made a mistake, I was the one calling the parent and trying to explain it to them. And some parents would just say, "Ugh, God, like, why is this still happening? Why can't they
Mm.
just get over it?" And I'm like, "'Cause they're learning how to human. You
Yeah.
cannot learn in a one-off, one fell
No.
swoop. Like, learning to human requires small, painful experimentations and repetition, and truly, when they feel excluded, it feels like they can't breathe."
And I think what's fascinating about this period is, I think Lucy Fuchs called it, well,
Mm,
she described the
mhm,
mentalizing that goes on. And the
yes.
mentalizing is when you go from sort of knowing what you think and
Yep,
knowing, listening to other people, but then you
mhm,
suddenly realize that they may have different opinions to you, and
yes.
they may be being sarcastic, or
Yep,
you have to start trying to read signals in a much more
mhm,
complex way, which is very difficult.
mhm. Yeah, it's very difficult, and it's again this sort of we I think have a false belief that empathy is a character trait, when in fact cognitive empathy, that kind of perspective taking, is a skill, and we have to
Mm.
teach it explicitly like we would teach anything else. And yet I know you've had David Yeager on as a guest before. His sort of research around the mindset that we have about adolescence contributes to a lot of the dismissal at this age, that we expect them to be a nightmare or dramatic, and so that gives us backdoor permission to dismiss them and not take them seriously. But we are also missing there is the skill building. Is
So
the
let's go.
skill building.
But
Mhm.
let's go on to that, because you're saying we have a tendency to dismiss it. Let's
Mhm.
really dig into that,
Yeah.
because I think you're right. I think there's this like,
Mhm.
oh, it's going to be a nightmare. They're going to be awful.
Right.
Sort of
Mhm.
throwaway comments. Why is that a problem?
Oh, because it's everywhere. I mean, think about sort of every modern movie about adolescence and parents, every piece of media, the trope in everything that has to do with this age level is your friends are going to abandon you. Social peril exists, like horrific social peril exists around every possible turn. Your parents are going to treat you poorly, and that like bad things are going to happen, right? Like all the books around this age, all the movies around this age. And then as adults, we are also being primed from the time they are little. The story I told, right, about telling people I taught middle school and everyone would go, ugh, or God bless you. And I was like, no, your reaction is the problem. I think they're the best. When I show
Mm.
up with this love and affirmation and care, but that a lot of that comes from my own understanding. I had learning disability, I still do, but I got late diagnosed with learning disabilities young, and I was a nightmare. Like, my mom's joke is that she got nauseous from the ages of, like, 11 to 14 when she knew I was on my way home, because I
Wow.
was spending all day sort of code shifting and trying to survive in a situation, right, where I was worried at every threat that I was gonna say something wrong and look stupid,
Yes.
or I'd have to go to the secondary room to take my test because I got extended time, which always felt humiliating, even though it was an attempt to support me. So I was a kid who caused trouble. Like, I got kicked out of
Yeah.
class and was a behavioral issue on purpose because it was way better. The vulnerability risks seemed so much lower to be known as the sort of like smart ass problem kid who got to
Yes.
spend a lot of time in school suspension because the lady was cool. She gave you Jolly Ranchers and she let you read. Why wouldn't I want to spend my day there? And it took me a
Yeah, that makes
long
so much
time
sense.
to figure that out. So that was all part of my empathy for that age group, is that we just expect the worst of them. I always ask
Mm.
parents to think about this. Is an odd fact, but in the States, we have something called Toys for Tots, which is a non for profit organization that sort of like people can donate to. And the goal is to like give Christmas gifts, right? To sort of give Christmas gifts to folks who might get children who might not otherwise get some. It stops at 13. So you're 12, you get a toy for Christmas. Nothing happened. Nothing about your family's social situation changed. Nothing about your desire to be cared for, nurtured, and belong changed. You just grew a year older, and now all of a
Oh,
sudden
wow.
society's decided you are no longer allowed, like, comfort, this sort of, childish stuff. And I think
Yes.
if you ask young people, if you have young people in your life and you're like, Is this really true? Ask them what happens when more than 2 of them show up in a public place. No one's excited to see them. Everyone starts policing them, following them around, assuming they're going to nick things, assuming they're going to get up to no good. They show up somewhere, right, with like money to spend, and people are like, right? They just get met with this
Yes, you're
sort of
so
dismissal
right.
before you know anything about their character. And young people say that all the time, that people just sort of expect the worst from us. And I think the challenge of that, and us parents, you may not expect the worst from your kids. I'm not talking about individual families. I'm talking about this larger social story and then the impact
Sure.
that it has. And so when we think about this fact that cognitive empathy is a skill, perspective taking, right, it requires being invited in. Thinking about friendships and relationships and all these things requires someone being willing to sit with you and talk about it. And
Yes,
that,
so true.
because we have, and this is not to say parents don't have endless hours in the day to sit and, spend 7 hours talking through whatever friendship drama is currently happening. That's not the ask, though. They actually don't want that much of your
No,
time,
they
right?
don't.
They
They
mostly
don't.
want to
No.
talk about it with their friends. But what they
Yeah.
do want is to come home and feel like their emotional experience is important and deserves attention.
Yeah.
And when we
I think
have
that's
this
yeah.
story that we consume, we don't mean to. None of us are coming at our children with malicious intent. The world is busy. There's chaos around every corner. Adults are tired. There's so many things happening. We are not planning on abandoning our children. But when we've been swimming in this story that they just have to get through this phase, that it's not permanent, that everyone has a hard time, and then your kid comes to you with a hard time inadvertently, you just have more of an inclination to be like, it's just, these friends don't even matter. You're not
Mm.
like, I'm not friends with anyone that I was friends with in middle school. Don't even worry about it. And we mean that as comfort, but it
Yeah,
is
guilty.
not.
I've done that.
Yeah, we all have.
I learned not to do it after a while, but no, absolutely done
Yeah,
that. And they're like, "Mummy, that's not helping."
right.
Yes, no, I love that point. One of the problems is that there can be a tendency to turn this pain
Mm-hmm.
in on themselves. I've seen this with my
Yes.
daughters where they'll talk about something and then they'll blame themselves.
Yes.
And they'll say, it's because of something I am.
Mm-hmm.
And this, so can
Yeah.
you talk a bit more about this kind of fixed identity that they can get?
Yeah, it's so common in early adolescence. We are just trying to figure out who we are. They're literally in the sort of developmental psychology term for it is ideation separation, which is where you're literally developing a new identity and separating from the prior you, right? Which is, we've watched our kids do it, like one day they're willing to wear, I don't know, a shirt with like a character on it from a childish TV show. And then all of a sudden it's like, throw that out. Don't ever, or a friend's
I
coming
never
over.
wore that.
I never wore that, burn it. Or a friend's coming over after school and you get a panic text that says, make sure all my stuffies are off my bed. Right? They're in this
Yeah.
moment of trying to decide and find. And it's very common. Self-criticism is a safety behavior. It is our brain's very clunky attempt at self-care. If I tell myself I suck first, it
Right,
will
yes,
not
of course.
hurt as much if someone else does it because I've sort of conditioned myself to believe it. It's something that young people do often. They catastrophize. They believe that exclusion, social pain, social aggression is an indication that there is something fixed and unchangeable about themselves. And then they internalize that. And young women are far more likely to do this than young
Yes,
men
for
because
sure.
we don't give young women the same permission to experience negative emotion. Think about how much we police anger in women and
Yeah.
girls from a
Yeah.
young age. So from a young age on the playground, you can see this, right? If you went to any playground in the world today after school, you would see young boys getting behavior about or feedback about their behavior. Jeff, don't push. You would see girls getting feedback about their character. Megan, be nice.
Oh, and I hate
Nice?
that word. Oh my goodness. I
Oh,
used to
gosh.
constantly say to people,
We
please
could
don't tell
go-
my daughter to be nice.
Yes.
Do not use that. No.
Never.
What do you mean? What does that even mean?
Yes, that's my number one
Drives
joke.
me mad.
When parents start working with me and
Yes.
they have young girls, I'm like, here's the deal. The first rule is that you have to stop using the word nice. You have to stop telling them to be nice, thinking about niceness. It's not a quantifiable thing, and it's actually not something they have control over. So we need to name. That's a big part of it, is that we need to name the behavior. I need you to use kind words. I need you to be a friend who thinks of others. I need you to be someone in our house who does chores because we're all participants. I need you, right? I need you to use kind words with your friends because you are a thoughtful person. I need you to give other people permission to be messy because we are all messy sometimes. That's very different than, be nice. And that's why a lot of what we see with young women is what they call in the research relational aggression, right? When you weaponize your relationship. Because sometimes young women feel like to be like loud, rude, to like be confrontational is in violation of niceness. So instead they internalize and then they weaponize their relationship.
I talked on many occasions about that kind of mean girl thing and the toxic friendship groups, and so that's a fascinating reflection on that.
I always tell parents is I'm like, please, I know we all love the movie, but please stop calling it mean girl behavior, because that's not what it is. And then that also leaves boys out. So if we have this agreed term, right, that like mean girl behavior again is something we are all socialized to expect from the young girls in our lives. And then we're surprised when they exhibit that behavior, when we've sort of been telling them, right, media, all the things have been coaching them that that's actually just what you're going to start doing when you're older. It also leaves boys out. How are boys supposed to make sense of like unkindness, but also more importantly, connection? When I taught middle school, I can't tell you how many a heartbreaking conversation I had with young men about like, I want to hug my friend, like the jealousy they felt for relational closeness women are allowed. I want to hug my friends. I would love to hold hands with a friend walking down the hallway. Like when I would sit with them sometimes and they'd have this chance to be open with me and I would say like, what's going on with you and so and so. And they're like, I don't know, our friendship feels weird. And like, I just want to be closer to them again, but I don't know how to be close to them now because I can't. Like when we were little, like little boys talking about like when we were little, we used to be able to like hug and hold hands and it was fine. And now, in a totally non-sexual way, just in a connective relational way, they want physical intimacy and closeness and they're also not allowed it.
No, that's such a good point. And I talked about that in an episode where I'd used the research of Niobe Way, who studied boys for decades, and how it switches for them around this period, a bit later than with girls. Before that, it's like love story, these really, really close, loving relationships together. And then suddenly they feel that if they've got to fit in the man box, they can't be doing that anymore. And it's a horrible thing to experience.
Right. And how can we invite them as well into this sort of idea that like, no, so relationships are not fixed. I constantly used to reference to my male students, my brother and his best friend Kevin have been best friends since they were 8 years old. I've asked my brother and he talks about my mom's support for his closeness with Kevin. And like they would have like sleepovers and they're both married, they both have children, but like they still like I hear them on the phone with each other. They say I love you when they hang up. They will text each other like the sweetest things and they're both 37. But I've asked my brother, I'm like, how did you maintain this with Kevin? And he was like, our parents were always we just felt like we were allowed to be close to each other. And they did.
That.
Like they took each other as dates to a school dance. And they were just these like confident, but they were also socially successful. They were popular kids, but they just had this confidence that they were allowed to be close and loving. And I think part of that is because they were allowed to talk about it.
I think they're allowed to talk about it, but I also think that as long as, from what I was understanding from Niobe Way's studies, was as long as the boys somehow fit inside the man box enough, then they can do that.
Right.
If they're too far out of it, then they risk They risk being
Completely.
ejected,
And they
and
were,
it's
like,
really
totally, to root
problematic.
it back in that, right, and to keep it
Yeah,
rooted in what we know from the research truth is they were athletically successful, right? They played football, they played
yeah.
lacrosse. So you're 100% correct that because they fit enough in the man box, this sort of quirk of their friendship to their peers was allowed.
It's
Mhm.
such a pity. So for parents, you can get the parents who are quite dismissive. Done
Mhm.
that myself at times,
Yeah.
and also the parents who really just want to rescue their children felt
Yes.
that as well because, when
Yes.
they're younger, I mean, my daughter even articulated it. She said, when I was little, you'd just have a play date and then I would make
Yeah.
friends with them because, it would
Ugh.
just be that simple. And now you can't
Mhm.
do that. And it's
Right.
really hard. And I go, yeah,
Mhm.
I can't. But so
Yeah.
what's the difference between sort of supporting our child and rescuing them?
Distress tolerance. We have to model
Oh,
that distress and discomfort are manageable, survivable, and normal. It is normal to be uncomfortable, and often kids get their cues from us. And I
yeah.
often encourage one of the researchers I adore, Dr. Susan David, who has a wonderful book called Emotional Agility. She talks about this a lot, this idea that you know, we have to allow the agility in it and that we have to, believe that these traits are changeable, that, that we can do things differently, but that discomfort is very normal and that her sort of phrasing around toxic positivity is the reason it can be
Mm.
so challenging, particularly in parental relationships, which is the normal desire to save your kid from pain. It is normal. I tell every parent I work with that. Like, of course you want to scoop them up and, you know, micromanage their friendships and text the other parent on their behalf or text the school about some group chat nonsense that's happening or whatever. But what the message you send to your kid inadvertently is you are incapable.
Yes.
Your discomfort is a red alarm threat and that we can control other people, which we cannot. And what
Yes.
you accidentally are telling them is that your comfort as a parent is more important than their lived reality.
Oh my goodness, that's brilliant. I love that. Yeah, it's true. It's
Mhm.
absolutely true. And it's funny, I remember my daughter, well, both of my daughters have been through these friendship
Mhm.
problems.
Mhm.
And I remember one of them asking me about it. And I said to her, I don't know how this will sort
Yeah.
itself out. All I
Yeah.
do know is that things change and they will
Right.
change. Like it will not stay like this forever. And that was the all I could
Mhm.
give her. But she did say that helps. This
But
kind
that's
of idea, it's not
actually
going to stay like this forever.
like in the research in the research that you referenced at the beginning about the study that showed um a way to help prevent
Mm.
depression in youth, that was the whole study. It was a study
Right, of
that
course. So let's
Dr.
talk about that. Let's talk about, yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
let's
David
get
Yeager.
into
Who
it.
was the?
Mhm.
I don't know who else was because David Yeager is brilliant. He wrote
Yeah.
10 to 25. He's absolutely phenomenal.
Mhm.
If you haven't listened to that episode, you must.
Mhm.
But there was someone else who
Yeah,
conducted that study
Adrian
with him.
Sumi, who was his,
Yeah.
I think his research assistant was what I gathered
So
when I was looking it up. But it's fascinating. It was about this intervention. Their theory was, right? So David is famous. He's a protege of Carol Dweck, who's sort of the creator of growth mindset. And Dr. Yeager became, I think very understandably aware that we could apply growth mindset theory in a bunch of different spaces and likely have positive outcomes. One of the places that they found that this study focused on was, what if we teach youth that you can also apply growth mindset to relationships? And so they took these groups of this one study I referenced is a sample size of 600 students, but it's been replicated over and over. And the important thing, which is one thing I, as someone who's a real research nerd, really appreciate about Dr. Yeager, is that he doesn't just focus on like middle to upper class white kids. So that sample
no, you're
size
right. Yes.
included a really diverse social sampling, and the intervention was very small. the 600 children who got the intervention. So this is the thing I think sometimes parents get lost in. It's like, I don't have time for a 5-hour conversation. Like we got dinner to make. Or let's be real. What we also know is that all of a sudden your kid doesn't want to talk to you all day. And then at 11:15, they want to crawl into your bed and you're like, my guy, I got to go to sleep, So I think one thing that I really hang my hat on here as someone who supports parents is that the intervention was 25 minutes and they did it once. It was
How
not
amazing is that? 25 minutes once.
one time. So it was not 5 hours of therapy. It was not a weekly appointment with the school counselor, the school support team. It was one 25-minute intervention that had kids do 4 really specific things, which is why I immediately, when you joked that you said, listen, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I know that it's not going to stay like this forever. And I immediately was like, no, that's everything. Like if parents listen to this and take nothing else away, if every parent could train themselves to say exactly that, their kids would be better off.
Right.
Because here's what the study did. It taught them, the sort of fancy term for it is incremental personality theory. But increment, right? Think about the word increment. It's just small changes towards sort of a better outcome. And so the first thing was they taught these kids this theory, this incremental personality theory, which is really just growth mindset in friendships, which is that everyone changes. You were not victimized or excluded because of a fixed trait in you. And the kid who did the nasty thing or the hurtful thing, they also, like that isn't due to a fixed trait in them. So you can change, but also that kid
They
can change.
too, yes.
Then they had them read a very brief article on neuroscience that just explained that thoughts, feelings, and behaviors can build new pathways that they can change, right? So you introduce the idea, you give a little bit of science to back it up. So parents, if you're like, what? How would I do that at home? Just Google neuroplasticity and show your kid 1 2-minute video. Then here's the piece. Then they had the kids read 2 quotes, short quotes from kids who were older than them that sort of proved I have experienced this. I have seen my peers change. I have changed. What this theory and this research says is true. I've seen it happen. That's you want to hang your hat on something, you just need an older kid to tell them, right? That's going to weigh 10 times as much. And then lastly, they had these kids write a little quote of their own telling them they were going to use it for future 9th graders.
Oh, I love that. Yes,
And that was
this is similar to the growth mindset, because I think he had a
100%.
study in his book where he talked about they were doing very similar things.
Yeah.
And they'd also done one when kids had started university and they'd had
Yes.
older kids. Yes. This is all part of it, the same sort of skills, but it's brilliant.
Completely.
I love that.
I think there's a researcher I also love, James Zakiel, who talks about hope. He has a great book called Hope for Cynics. He did this amazing study at Stanford. So he works at Stanford, and they saw this, like, kids were really complaining about social exclusion at Stanford. If you have an educator or someone who works in a school listening to this and thinking, well, how do I make that come alive for my students? Do you know what they did? They polled their students and they got statistics, little things that said 98% of Stanford students want to make a new friend.
Yes.
87% of Stanford students like helping other people solve their problems. 92% of Stanford students like listening if you're having a hard time. All they did was put those statistics on posters and put them in highly trafficked places around campus. It's these small, and I think sometimes that's what keeps schools, institutions, parents feeling stuck, is they think like, I don't know, like, how do I do the big thing? It's not the big thing. It is small, incremental things. So exactly what you said, the way parents can actually replicate that study in their own home, do exactly what you did. You say, I don't know exactly what's going on here, how long this is going to last. I do know it's not going to last forever.
Yes. The whole thing about being an adolescent is that you're changing, you're playing with your personality, you're finding your identity, But so are they. So when they're
Correct.
having a bad day or they're behaving in a certain way, that doesn't mean to say they're this person. It means
Correct.
that's what's happening at that moment.
Right. That's what's
It's
happening at that moment, and the
yeah.
this is where when we talk about the skill of empathy, right? It being a teachable skill,
Mm,
adolescents are in this weird moment where they are progressing from what is totally normal, expectable narcissism. And I don't mean sort of like
yes.
big and
No.
psychological scary narcissism. Like, we have to think about
This is normal.
ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah, how
Yeah.
are you supposed to figure out the world if you aren't focused on the self? We actually have to help them start sort of like looking around, right? And looking at other people and other situations. And so, exactly what you said, we have to invite those kinds of questions when they come to us in those hard moments, rather than saying, ugh, this is just drama that'll pass, like this, that'll pass. You
Mm,
say, like, that sounds hard. Tell me more.
yes.
You let them
Yes.
explain. You say something like, so many people are going through this friendship churn right now. And I know that doesn't make it easy. That doesn't make it feel easier. Like, very subtle nod to, like, you are not alone in this. You are not the only one going through this, without dismissing them. It's saying things to your kid when they come to you like, this sounds, God, humans are complicated, aren't they?
Mm,
I went
yeah.
through something
Yeah.
similar like this with a friend when I was your age. Don't tell them your whole story. They actually don't want to know, like,
They
every
don't want
dirty
to
detail,
know.
but tell them one or two things,
Mm,
and then don't say, but it got better. You just say, and it was hard. I
yeah.
figured it out eventually, but it was hard.
Mm,
You normalize without, right, dismissing. And this is the line we want to walk because, we can't. We just don't, no one has the bandwidth to spend,
no.
7 hours talking to their kid. It's just
No,
actually micro shifts and
I
micro
agree.
moves.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think I think the most important thing at the start is just the acknowledgement, the going, yeah, that sounds
Yeah,
really hard. I think I found that that was one of the most important things. And I think with my kids, there was an awful lot of looking around and thinking everybody else had themselves sorted.
yes,
And they were the only person
of
who
course.
couldn't seem to figure this out.
Right.
And it was the more I was able to say, I think they're probably having a hard time too.
Yeah.
And that we're all kind of hiding
Mm-hmm.
how we're feeling.
Right.
It helped them to kind of go, oh, okay, it's not just me. Because
Completely.
I
I
think that's the
always joke,
trick.
yeah, that they're like little meerkats, right? They're all sort of up on
Mm.
their hind legs, just looking
Yes.
around. And they think, falsely, that everyone else has it together, or this thing they're
Yeah.
experiencing is singular. And it's not. Which is also, when you talked earlier about like internalization and self-criticism, that's part of where it comes from, right? Is like, your brain just wants to make sense, right? Our brains are storytelling creatures. So how do we deal with anxiety, right? Anxiety is the distal fear of, like, uncertainty. We just make up stories. And unfortunately, our brain is trained usually to make up critical stories. And it takes work to
Mm.
train it to have more empathetic stories or more kind of zoomed out stories. And in adolescence, our job really is, how do I normalize but help you zoom out? We also don't give kids, I think, enough permission to be like, you actually, like, when we tell them like niceness or kindness, right? It doesn't, they're like, well, that kid was not kind to me.
Yeah.
So why do I have to be nice in return? And we have to give them more complex solutions, but also like more complex reasons for why. When I had a kid come to me and tell me like some kid had done something genuinely hurtful and unkind, I did not. I think people might be surprised, but like, I did not push them to heal that relationship. I would say, like, man, that does sound really complicated. What would it
Oh, you
look
said, oh,
like?
that's interesting.
And
Yeah.
I would literally say to this kid, well, what does it look like to be in community with someone that you don't like right now?
Oh, I love that.
And
Yeah.
they'd be like, what? I don't know. Cause that's what they don't know how to do. It's
Mm.
like, you don't, yeah, I'd always say, like, you don't have to forgive them today.
No.
That's what we're going to work towards eventually. But also, like, they might have done something to you that feels unforgivable. And, like,
Mm.
I'm not going to tell you that that's not true for you. So, what I'm going to say instead is, so what does community look like when we don't like everybody we're in community with, or we don't agree with everybody we're
Mm.
in community with? And they'd say, well, I don't know. And I'd be like, so to me, I'll offer some suggestions, right? It doesn't look like getting all your friends together now to talk poorly about that kid.
Mm,
It doesn't look like socially excluding them. If the consequence is that they used to get invited to play, like in the States, there was this thing, it was called wall ball, where like literally these boys would just like huck a tennis ball and you had to touch the wall before the tennis ball did. And it'd be like, sometimes it'd be like, that kid did something gnarly to a couple of you in the wall ball crew. Like, it's okay that he doesn't get invited, like he doesn't get invited to play wall ball tomorrow. That is like the natural consequence for his behavior.
yeah.
And
Yes.
and this is where I think even in schools and parents, sometimes this is where we micromanage of like rushing their timelines and also like removing helpful social natural consequences. And I'm not saying exclusion with malice, right, or negative intent, but like, I don't know, if you've been a jerk to 6 of the wall ball kids, you don't get to
You're
play
not going to
wall
be
ball anymore.
playing. Yep. Yep. I
And
love
that
that.
actually is
And
gonna
own
do
it.
more
Own
and
it.
own it, and that
Mm.
doesn't mean then that you're gonna all take that kid out of the group chat and tell him he can never play wall ball again and da 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 da, right? Like, we want to think about, like, reciprocity and roads to redemption, and a lot of it would be like,
I
"Listen,
love that. Yeah.
have you ever made a mistake and said something pretty gnarly to a friend?" They're always gonna say yes, right? And then you say yes. So, like, I don't know. Let's think about timeline here. Like, what does road to redemption look like for this kid? Like,
Mm.
also, what can a new relationship look like where this person's still in your social ecosystem, but they are not as close as they were before, and they need to earn back some of that trust before they can be close? I think we often also don't give kids the agency to set their own boundaries around friendships. Like, that's a question that I would, tell parents all the time is like, well, have you asked your kid, like, what kind of boundaries they need around this friend right now? And they'd be like, well,
I
no.
yes.
And I'd be like, yeah, I don't like, they let them offer up some of these solutions too.
I love what you're saying because I love this conversation about community. What
Mm,
you're doing is you're rolling out a canvas for them to actually
mm-hmm.
look on and think, how do I make this work?
Yes.
Instead of trying to
Yes.
fix it for them. And it's so
Yes.
important because it gives them space to think
And
and ownership.
it's civic skills. Like, if
Yeah.
we don't let kids figure out how to mend relationships or decide what feels like unsafe or, challenging when they're 12, we are not setting them up to thrive when they're 35 and someone has
Mm.
different political beliefs than they do or votes differently than they do. I mean, discomfort that is, and this is again a Susan David quote, like, discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life.
Yeah. I love
And
that.
that means discomfort, but in a variety of different ways. There's
Mm.
another, again, I'm admitted research nerd. There's another researcher in the States. Her name's Dr. Mary Helen Immergino Yang, who did this amazing study about transcendent thinking, which is a complicated name when I just call it philosopher mode. It's this developmental tendency we see in kids to start asking bigger questions about
Yes.
fairness, about justice, about all these things. And the relationships fall right in there. And her research showed that the more we encourage kids to dive into complexity, to gray area, to grapple with kind of bigger moral questions, it was fascinating. It was both an immediate
Mm.
increase in like self-liking, but it was lasted for 5 years. They measured these kids
Wow.
both in the moment and they followed them for 5 years. These young people, 5 years later, reported better levels of life satisfaction. I'm a huge fan of talking to young people about research, right? So when I work with
Mm.
young people, which I do often, I get hired to speak a lot at schools here in the States. And because that's kind of translating research into tools you can use at the kitchen table or in the classroom is kind of my sweet spot. And I asked kids, I said, why do you think this is? Why do you think that like encouraging this kind of big picture thinking, uh, like, because it actually also, another fascinating piece that parents might not care about as much is that it actually grew their brains. It grew
Ugh,
the connective networks between their sort of emotional self and their control, like their ability to self-regulate
fascinating.
and self-control. But I ask kids, and I swear it's really funny. I Venmo this young man. He's a he was at a school in Columbus, Ohio. I Venmo him $15 every time I reference this because I tease him that I have to pay him for his great idea that I now steal and dine out on. But I asked them, why do you think this is? And they said, this kid raised his hand with this look of just like, oh. And he said, well, yeah, if everything's complicated, I don't have to feel bad about the fact that I'm complicated.
Ooh, yes,
And it was,
love
and
it.
and these kids all were
Mm,
sort of like, oh, yeah. And I was like, yeah, right. If you get more comfortable with the idea that like ethics are complicated, life is complicated, all these things are complicated, then your own complication, either internally or socially or academically, like it's not a death sentence, right? It's not
yeah,
this fixed mindset that there's
it's all
something
part of the
wrong with me.
process.
Right. You see it as part of your trajectory, not a declarative on who you are.
And it's like the social conflict and any of this conflict is information, not a
Right.
verdict.
Right. Right. Yeah. Emotions are data, not directions. Right. They're
Yeah,
just
yeah.
data. And how do we teach kids to see them as that, you know? And how do we, there was a framework I used when I was teaching middle school. Her name's Dr. Donna Hicks, and I'm trained in her dignity-based conflict resolution framework. And the simplest thing is just it has this list of sort of dignity is that inherent worth of every person. Um, and it's not negotiable, right? No matter what people have done or said. But she has this list of 10 things that people need to feel like they matter. And it's things like accountability, inclusion, fairness, recognition. When I had kids in social conflict, they knew the rule, which was you came into my office, you each got a list of the elements of dignity, and you had to spend 5 minutes writing down what element was at the root of your discomfort.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love that.
And then
I
when
need
we
that list.
had oh, I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Then when we had the conversation with the two kids, when I was mediating the two kids, it was about behavior they could change, not an assassination on your character. The
Yes,
thing
yes,
you
because you're
did,
staking it outside them.
yes,
Yes.
the
Ah.
thing you did made me feel a lack of X. That is so different than you're a jerk and everybody hates you, right?
There's nowhere to go from there.
And
Yeah.
then it is kind of also the
Mm.
foundation of that incremental personality theory that like if these things matter, if everyone needs these 10 things, ah shoot, man, everybody does. So all of a sudden you
Mm.
can get a kid without dismissing their emotions. You can get a kid to say like I hear you, man. That sounds so hard that, you felt really excluded. What do you think what like I don't know, do you think maybe they were feeling a lack of something that motivated them to do this? And then all of a sudden I would get kids being like, "Oh, well, yeah, we were all on like Roblox last night and like they sucked and they were taking down our team, so we actually just kicked them out." And then, my job, right, is to sit very like, empathetic face and go, "Oh, huh." And then he started a nasty group chat about you. Weird. I'm just curious, like, do you see any connections? And then usually
Oh,
the
I
kid
love
would
that.
start laughing and the kid would be like,
Mm.
yeah, okay. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Got
listen,
me.
he doesn't
Yeah.
get to start a nasty group chat about you. And I get why you would kick out, like, if the kid sucks and he's dragging down your team and you guys just want to play and have fun, like, I get why you would kick him out. But also, like, well, are we that surprised then that he did something nasty in return?
Yeah.
And then it just becomes this conversation about, like, you're a person, you're human, you're just
Yeah.
learning how to do this. And then it gave kids, I think, again, I always talked about the power of that, like, shared vocabulary, was that it's kind of how you teach them cognitive empathy. Because I always say we need belonging to be an open book test. Everything needs to be right out there for them. Kids need to be able to look to people or signage or whatever to give them the answer. We can't sort of like trick them and
Yeah.
expect them to
Yeah.
know the answers because they don't, because they're
No.
babies. Like they're basically still
Yes.
babies, right? And so how do we,
Yeah.
there's I have young kids, mine are 2 and 5, and my husband sent me this Instagram meme the other day that was like, when you want to be mad at them, but you know their internal monologue sounds like this, and it was just this like doot 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 doot, like this silly little noise, and it's like you want to be mad at them, but like this is probably what's going on in their brain. And I actually sent that same reel to like a bunch of my coaching clients because I was like, listen, I know they're bigger and it seems, but like they don't know. And we're holding them accountable or we're dismissing them when they're trying to learn. Not because anyone's
Yeah.
doing anything wrong. Like just because we all have we're swimming in a water that tells us a story that's not that helpful. So I
Yes,
teased
and
them.
I
I
think
was like, next time your kid's being really a pain in the butt, can just look at them and kind of imagine that their internal monologue is just a silly song.
and I
How
think
will
when I
that change it?
no, and I think when I took away any of the shame,
Mm.
it becomes so much easier to have a conversation about how you move
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
Once you can remove this sense that they're wrong or they're
Right.
bad for it.
Right. And it's so
It's
hard
great.
too, though, because also, like,
Yeah.
we never want to believe that they're the one who did something wrong, right? Like, it's
Mm,
also very hard to look at them
yeah.
through eyes that aren't biased by either how much we love them or the fact that, like, maybe your kid's 12 and has ADD and forgets stuff all the time and has been driving you crazy. And so
Yeah.
you don't give them the benefit of the doubt. And they come home with the friendship concern, and maybe you've gotten too accustomed to, like, well, what might you have done? And then the kid backs off, right? It's like we all just sort of have these biases when it comes to our kids, which
Yeah.
is normal, natural, and part of loving them. And yeah, it's not their character. It's just a
No.
moment.
And what would you say to any parent who is really struggling at the moment and thinking,
Mm.
my child is never going to find their people. My child is friendless. This is
Mhm.
it's been going on for ages. I
Mhm.
don't know how to move forward from here.
Mhm. I mean, honestly, the first thing I would tell the parent is to practice self-compassion. It's one of the most powerful emotion mitigation tools out there.
Mm.
Because like your emotions are a big part of this. I remember sitting across a mom of a 6th grader asked me out for coffee and she basically said what you said. And she was like, she just doesn't have social connection. I don't. So there's 2 stories here. One is that in this case, the kid was perfectly happy. Like, the kid
Oh,
loved reading
yeah,
alone. The
right.
kid was actually very comfortable with the fact that they had, like, one or because I had done everything I was supposed to do as a dean. I had obviously noticed that this kid was socially isolated, had done a lot of and, like, I had come to the conclusion of, like, "Man, this kid's just an
She's happy.
introvert, and school's hard for them." So it's actually not the setting where they're gonna find their people because it's just too
So
loud and noisy
interesting.
during the day. I mean, think about how hard school is
Yes.
for introverted kids. And so I remember having coffee with this mom and I was like, so there's that version where I was like, what if your expectations aren't matched to the kid in front of you?
Oh, this is such an important point.
She was such a social. Then I said, just before I gave her that advice, I said, can you tell me a little bit about what you were like in middle school? And it was, the president of every club and very, and I knew this mom. I loved this parent. Like she was still that person, right? She was like the head of the PTO. She was always hosting fundraisers, right? Like I was like, yeah, how might how you feel socially comfortable and successful just like not match your kid's definition?
Oh,
And
this is
she
so
was like,
important.
what? And I was like, I'm just
Mhm.
saying, what if for a week you looked at your kid's social life and believed that it was exactly how they wanted it? And that mom, it's really lovely. I mean, she and I are still very close, but like she jokes all the time. She'll just text me and be like, I'm still working on it, and her daughter's like a sophomore or
Yes.
June. She's a junior in college now.
Yeah.
And I taught the brother as well, totally different kid. And the
Mm.
mom was like, oh my God, I didn't. So there's that one piece, which is that we might have expectations for socialization that don't match our kids. There's the other much more painful piece, which is when you are the one absorbing the hurt because your kid desperately wants that connection and they just aren't getting it. So the other side of that coin, I think, is deciding how you can help your kid host. I think we often leave a lot of onus on kids to be in charge of their own social lives, but like what is a play date with some kids that that they might have something in common with or social connection with? What does it look like to arrange a middle school play date? Now,
Mm.
does that look like inviting them all over to like, you know, um make like pizzas together? Is it like, a night where they all come over and they share like 4 TikTok videos that they think are very funny, and they have to jokingly like air share them onto a TV and like, share them with their friends? I have a Substack post about this, but like, how do you help your kid host? And it has like stupid ideas, like funny, stupid ideas. So there's one is that like, how can you sort of orchestrate a play date that is appropriate, developmentally appropriate for them? The other is, what are opportunities that they could get involved in where you think that increases the chance that they are going to meet the kind of people like them? If your kid's a coder, what kind of clubs exist in your community that might get them closer that aren't school? So oftentimes,
Yeah.
and this is different based on like resources and what we have access to, but oftentimes school, we sort of incorrectly assume that school is the only place they can make friends.
Mm.
How can you invite your kid to maybe choose like, or you just do it for them, and them, you're the subject matter expert on your kid. They love X, Y, and Z. Can you find a Lego club nearby? Can you also potentially shift your expectations of the age group they should be hanging out with? I saw this all the time in middle school. Kids who, in the States, some kids start kindergarten and they turn 5 during kindergarten. My daughter, for
Mm.
example, has a late birthday. She's going to join kindergarten and then turn 6. And that when they're 6, it's not such a big deal. When they're 11 and 12, it's a very big deal. I would see this. I would have kids who still wanted to play with dolls, and kids
Oh,
who
this is really
wanted to
big,
like
important.
wear sexually provocative tops and like right in the same grade.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so how can you also potentially be like, oh, my child, if they're a younger 6th grader or a younger 11-year-old, they might actually enjoy hanging out with younger kids, and that's not a bad thing. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean something's wrong with them. How am I shifting my expectations to meet where they're at developmentally? The other thing is also, I think, trying as much as you can to encourage your kids in the moments that it feels possible. Because sometimes when you are sitting next to a kid who is really socially struggling, it feels impossible to push them towards hope. But I think, again, that like life is long. This is not your entire social story. That doesn't make this moment easier, but that's something I know to be true. How can I help in the moment? And that might mean for a period of time, you being more of their social net, right? You and
I did
your
that.
partner, you
Yes.
and your family. I mean, my parents did that for me for a while.
Yeah. I
Um,
became their best friend.
yeah. And there's
Mm.
nothing, and that knowing that you're doing that not with the goal to, there's this show in the state. I don't know if you've seen Arrested Development, but like the
Mm.
mother and the older son have this very funny relationship where they're very close to each other. And it's like, yeah, you're not doing it in
No,
place
you're stepping
of,
in just
yeah,
for
it's
a
not
while.
permanent.
No.
It's a temporary moment. And
Yes.
how can you temper your own expectations too for what what a healthy social life looks like? So for example, I think oftentimes like parents, and I completely understand why, have a really hard time sometimes with like kids getting their socialization through like gaming or phones and things like that. And I understand why. But how can you, if that is where your kid is finding community, set like healthy boundaries around being okay with that? Like maybe on the weekends, that means if your kid is finding a lot of a lot of comfort with peers in a place, how is it maybe on Saturdays then that boundary is laxer? Because I know that that kid's just gone through 5 days at school where they didn't feel accepted. So a big dose of like connection on a Saturday is going to really help them reset their sense
I
of
love that.
self, their
Yeah.
comfort. So I think that's a piece of it too. Of we all have to be a little flexible. Um, and yeah, also parents have to take care of their own emotional
Mm.
landscapes because it's
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 very
really
trying.
hard. It's very trying.
Yeah. No,
Mhm.
those are all absolutely brilliant suggestions. I love them. Thank you so much. Is there anything else before we go that you have a burning, thing you want to tell us?
I think just that, like, the more we can teach the kids in our lives that fun, dumb things are the bridge to connection, that cringe
Mm.
is actually a bridge to every good
Cringe is
thing you
cool.
want in life. That cringe is cool, the friends that you can be cringy with, and that taking the risk of cringe is often like going to get you closer to a thing you
I
actually
like
want.
that. Ah, what a great quote. Love that. Megan, this has been an absolute joy. You've had so many brilliant bits of information, tips. I'm sure people are going to want to come and find you. I've got the link to your Substack that I'm going to put in here. Is there any other thing that you want people to
Mostly
use
just
to come and find you?
Substack and Instagram are where I'm the most active.
Great.
But yeah, and I just really try, that's kind of my goal, is to take all this research that I really want to read and then distill it for you into something that you can do tonight at home. Yeah, it was like you and I have that so in common that like I love nerding out about it. I know you don't want to, right? Not you, but like the proverbial parent, like you don't have time. So I always joke with the parents. I'm like, you don't have to go read all the parenting books. I did it for you. So just like, and I taught middle school for 17 years. So I also know what actually works, you know.
Megan, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Your kindness and your lively enthusiasm. It's really infectious. That's it for now. If you want to get hold of me, I'm on Substack, teenagersuntangled.substack.com. My email address is teenagersuntangled@gmail.com. I love hearing your problems, your advice, your tips that I can share with everybody else. On the Substack, join in. Come and there's a whole community there, and you can sort of ask your questions, and I have PDFs that you can download for extra information and all that sort of stuff. So come and find us. We're both there. It's where all the best people are. Have a great week. Big hug. Bye-bye.